Good morning. I'm Nathan.
And I am John.
Welcome to our obscure podcast that hopefully not too many people will listen to. Today we will be discussing the plot map, issues, connections, and our recommendations for the novel Little Brother, written by Cory Doctorow.
Here's a little bit of a biography about the author. Cory Doctorow was born in Toronto, Ontario on the 17th of July, 1971. He's a British-Canadian science fiction author, as well as a journalist, who has published many award books, including Down and Out in the Magical Kingdom, Eastern Standard Tribe, and of course, Little Brother. He is also a blogger and co-editor of Boing Boing, a group blog which posts information on technology, science fiction, Disney, as well as a lot of other different themes. Cory Doctorow is truly a talented individual. I guess his award for outstanding for the best new writer from 2000 proves it.
But before we begin, we're going to pause this podcast to hear a word from our sponsor.
We return to our podcast with Nathan, who will be starting us off with the discussion of key elements from the novel.
In the novel Little Brother, Marcus Yellow is the main character. In the story, a common and recurring theme is government and propaganda. The story takes place in San Francisco after a group of terrorists bombed the Oakland Bridge. Since then, the Department of Home Security takes charge and starts apprehending random people that are suspicious or who have caused trouble in the past. The story revolves around a boy named Marcus, who once was taken and detained by the DHS for being within sight of the bombings. Once he was released, he decides to fight back against the government for the rights and freedoms his country must have.
I was just wondering, are there any connections you made with the novel or with any of the characters, or even worldwide events?
In this novel, a theme that can be connected to many current and historical events are the countless protests and riots often carried out by civilians who want to repel, rebel, and remove government propaganda. The connection that I share with Marcus is the passion of educating others with using technology. Whenever someone experiences technical difficulties or doesn't know how to address something, I will try my best to rectify it for them, as well as educate them on how they could fix it themselves for next time. Another connection that's a little more, you'll find out for yourself. Another connection is with a character named Charles. In the story, he can be a bit of a menace and a pest in one of Marcus's extracurricular programs. I can relate to this as I have caused plenty of trouble at such camps and programs in the past.
Nice. While reading Little Brother, I discovered a connection between my life and the protagonist's life, Marcus Yellow. When he showed grit by standing up against the DHS and fighting them, in my everyday life, I tend to spend a lot of time using grit to my advantage. I may not be fighting the government, but I show grit when I make mistakes and I persevere through them. Moreover, I show a lot of grit just by getting out of my bed in the morning for band or school. As it turns out, this is one of the only books where I share an actual connection with the main character. So Nathan, would you recommend this book to others?
Generally, I would recommend this book as it contains many topics that are still applicable and relevant today. However, considering that it was published in 2008, some of the content feels dated. In addition, the ending is quite passivated and for some other readers, not exactly conclusive. All things considered, I would give it a 6 out of 10. What about you, John?
Yeah, I honestly agree with you, Nathan. I would recommend this book because of how detailed it is, and there's a lot of great hangers. Like, for example, when he was getting arrested. Do you remember this, Nathan? Yeah. He was getting arrested, and the police officers told him to stay out of the building. Right then, the chapter ended. I was like, oh, I need to read more, but that was the time where we couldn't read more.
Right at the end of the building?
Yeah.
Okay, editing me here. The next bit of dialogue will go really off the tracks as it wasn't scripted and there was several misunderstandings while we were doing it live. I'll hand it back to the recording.
When he was in the coffee shop.
The coffee shop? Was it where two people were talking to each other?
Yeah.
like the Turkish coffee shop where they were discussing how he doesn't want to support the government with his new practices with the RFID readers and etc.
Pretty much.
Okay, I'm back. So as you can probably tell by now, that was very confusing. And there was I believe the misunderstanding was that at one point in the story, Marcus was arrested at a Mexican food restaurant for traveling around or something along those lines. Unfortunately, I don't have the book with me anymore, so I can't really check. But the coffee shop part was where the Marcus and the coffee shop owner were discussing how the coffee shop owner banned debit cards because of the new government policies and how the government is tracking debit cards. And that's what I meant by the RFID cards and stuff, but apparently John didn't get the idea enough to quite understand and pull through with the whole thing. And another entirely different issue is the whole ordeal with the fact that both the Mexican restaurant location and the coffee shop location got mixed up, because he was never arrested at the coffee shop location. He was arrested at the Mexican food location, but then he was insisting to me that he was arrested at the coffee shop location, and thus we had this whole misunderstanding while we were recording it live. So the rest of that statement is invalid, so I'm probably just going to remove it. It doesn't make sense to try and integrate it. So anyways, I'll hand it back to the podcast.
And it is easy to follow the storyline. It does not, however, have a conclusive ending, like Nathan described, but that doesn't really take away from how good the novel is. I would rate it a good 8 out of 10.
Thank you so much for listening to our first episode of the X-Net Preachers.
We really hope that you liked our topic and that you would like to see more of our podcasts in the future. You can find the rest of our podcast, or us, on YouTube at the X-Net Preachers, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.